Strange Fellows podcast from Winthrop, Maine. Welcome to episode 1 of Strange Fellows podcast, broadcast from Fellows Fortress right here in Winthrop, Maine. Today we have Louis Carey and Matt Burns.
Hello.
And myself, Seth Pillsbury. And we're going to talk about nerdy stuff.
Love it.
And, cool. So, how about we start with Dungeons and Dragons? How did you guys get started with Dungeons and Dragons?
You want to go first?
Sure. Dungeons and Dragons wasn't my first role-playing game.
Oh.
Yeah, we did, an Angel campaign. And, I played like a teenage kid that was squatting in a church, and like he worked in a metal shop all day, and like he spent all of his time like working out. He had a really high strength score.
You said an Angel campaign?
Yeah, like
What's the
like
game
Buffy,
system?
Angel.
Oh, okay.
Like Buffy
Yeah.
the Vampire?
Yeah.
So, like,
Oh.
what year is this? Is this...
That's a really good question. Probably early 2000s.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, it's got a pretty interesting mechanic to it. But I had a character that wouldn't use weapons, so he had a baseball bat and a really high improvised weapon score. And so it made for some really interesting campaign decisions, because like a lot of the time if my bat wasn't handy, I had to use whatever was
Frying pan.
lying
Rubber
around.
chicken.
And so a lot of it
Yeah.
was like
Get creative.
like the show investigating like paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
And so you'd get like a, somebody who was like voodoo cursing people around town and stuff. And then like you end up with like an undead that's chasing you through a house. And like you're fighting it in the kitchen. You look around, like roll really high on my, the way it worked is like you'd roll perception in your improvised weapon mod to like find an improvised weapon. And then you use like improvised weapon plus your strength score or whatever to use the weapon.
Yeah.
And so I think I decapitated the zombie with a phone wire,
Wow.
like a cord. But like just
Was that
all kinds of.
Was that the same game that, like, you, like, flew through the window, like you were telling that story?
Yeah. So his main deal was I used to find the fire escape in every building we went to. And so everybody would bust through the front door, and I would find another, because I had a really high stealth score, I'd find a way in the back. And I found somebody like that was actively changing into a werewolf. And so I went to grapple them and like nat 20 like twice in a row. And then like when it was finally going to throw me off, I used drama points to throw him out the window into the window of the building next door, and then like dive across into the building to like jump tackle.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's amazing.
And like we both like went through the wall like in that building.
So
Yeah.
was it like a older friend or somebody who, or did you just wander into a store? How did you?
I met Ryan and Will through some mutual friends. They're really interesting. Ryan was a writer.
Seems like writers are drawn to this stuff,
They spent a lot of time just like
Musicians, too.
right?
watching like X-Files and Star Trek and rolling characters, and like they were in a few different games. There was they were playing like Rift, and they were playing like a modified D&D Star Wars campaign, and like they knew I was the only person who ever showed up at like 3 a.m, so like they always just knew it was me because they slept all day. So like if I couldn't sleep or whatever, I'd just go over.
Yeah.
So it's like friends
like-
of a friend
Yeah.
that kind of introduced you, and then like it turned into this midnight crazy.
Yeah, it was
Cool
just
thing.
like if I was bored or whatever, or a lot of the time I was working at the dining hall at the college, and if I couldn't get back to Vassalboro that night, I would stay in town And so, like, if I was bored or whatever, I'd just go hang out over their house and watch X-Files or
That's
whatever.
awesome. Yeah, cool.
It's pretty sweet 90s stuff.
But yeah, no, that was like my first campaign I was ever in, and then I was in a couple campaigns that fell apart.
That could be a whole episode. Campaigns that fall apart.
Yeah.
But I was that campaign specifically. The next one was frustrating because I lost a job over it because I was working part-time at the pool hall.
So you're already super dedicated and willing to throw everything else to the wind for it.
Well, they tried to call me in on my day off.
Yeah.
And like I had stuff planned. I had a campaign that night. And like he didn't like my reason for not coming in, so
Do you know what
he called me back.
is happening tonight? We're gonna like, why? You know,
And I called my friends and I was like, my boss is mad. Like, I should really go in. Like, if we could reschedule that, they're like, you better be there, man. I'm like, all right. Well, it's my day off, so I'm just going to hold my ground.
Wow.
And he called me back and he's like, I'm training your replacement right now. You're on an on-call basis. And so I told them that. And then like an hour later, they were like, you can go to work if you want to. We're going to cancel. We're not feeling great anyway. Like,
Wow.
awesome.
Worthwhile sacrifice though, because now here
totally,
we are playing.
totally.
Talking.
Yeah, right.
What about you, Matt? When did you get into role-playing games?
So I probably got into games when I was I think probably in middle school, into role-playing games. And I was a pretty like nerdy, little kid and very like small kid, and so like I wasn't really like a cool kid, and I was kind of like drawn to like the quirky kids. And so I had this buddy of mine, and basically like he went to like the hobby store, which was like 5 minutes from the house, and he picked up this D&D book, and he was like, hey dude, like we should play this game. And I was like, okay, let's go for it. So like I automatically was like attracted to what D&D was all about, because like I said, nerdy little kid, I was into magic cards, super into like anything like fantasy. I was like fascinated by Games Workshop miniatures. Like there was another hobby store that had like a showcase, of like painted stuff, and so I was like immediately into it.
So you got into GW before. You got into the Warhammer scene before D&D then?
Well, no, I didn't, because it like I never. It was always like I wanted to like get into it, but it was like hockey. It was like, yeah, it's too expensive. Like we're not doing that. You know, so like I never got into it, but I was all like that. That was like driving this urge to like do stuff and like play a game.
Well, D&D won't knock your teeth out.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No dentist bills usually.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so like, anyway, like me and this guy, like we would get these games going, and we had this other kid that would join us, and then maybe there were like a couple transient other kids that like kind of came and went, and we would play at my house every Friday and Saturday night, and sometimes all day Sunday, like at my parents' kitchen table. And like, dude, okay, so the best part, right, is like we didn't know what we were doing. So like this kid that like started it all, like he was the DM, and he like knew the game really well, but like we were like just like kids, man. So he was like, dude, it was like the first like I don't know, a couple months we were playing, and like, the stakes were pretty high, and our characters were like maybe around like level 5 or something. And we like complete this like, quest or whatever, and like kill this bad guy. And he's like, okay, like all of a sudden you're standing like in heaven, and like a giant like god comes down, and like he gives you like, a +5 longsword. He gives you like that, and he just gave us like all this OP
The
stuff.
god just comes down and goes totally Oprah on the party.
Yeah, dude, like you could have, and so like, I was like some crazy 2nd edition class that I pulled out like one of those handbooks, and it was like the Mystic, and somehow like I broke the character, so he like wore plate mail, he had like a whatever +8 longsword, he had like dragon wings, but dude, it was the best thing ever. We face rolled everything, dude, and like we'd fight like 3 dragons at a time, and this kid that was DM was super smart. he's like a doctorate in like statistics now in Philadelphia. He's like a really
Wow.
He could run these combats like so coordinated, super complex spells and all that, and it was like the dude was incredible, man. So that was like my first foray into Dungeons and Dragons, and I just really, really loved the hell out of D&D, and like the only thing I and maybe this is another topic, but the only thing I like regret about D&D is just that I didn't have it in my life more, because there was a really long period of time where I didn't play, and it was kind of like off my radar, and now it's like I'm back and like
Yeah.
I
feel that.
I feel like kind of a kid again, like one of the things we used to do when we were kids was fucking record ourselves talking. Sorry, I didn't say the F word, but now we're doing that again, I'm like, man, this is great. So, it's good therapy to be with.
I think we all used
voice
to make mixtapes and stuff like that.
Oh,
yeah.
It's just growing up in the 80s and 90s, man.
Yeah, we're all in that 90s crowd. And I think it's funny. I think I'm hearing your foot tap.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I do the same thing, but my foot's suspended.
Good idea. Yeah.
It's funny. You mentioned the vampire thing. Like, it was the same thing for me before I played D&D. I played only it was Vampire the Masquerade. And it was, remember that?
Yeah, dude.
Like, I had this vague memory.
We talked about this, yeah.
Yeah, probably, yeah. And, like, it was like, I think I was like 9. I think it was right after my dad passed away. My dad's sister and her son Derek, like, came by and, like, we were spending time together. And he's the one that got me into, started with Vampire the Masquerade, and that, like, blew my mind. And then it was, like, Dungeons and Dragons, and then another time when I went to visit him, he was painting Warhammer minis.
Yeah.
So it's like the beginning of all of these crazy things that took over a lot of my imagination and wallet for the rest of my life. Started with cousin Derek.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a cool time. And I think we're all three of us are these interesting generation folks where it's like we got into this in the 90s where you couldn't just Google how does XYZ work.
No.
You couldn't watch a YouTube video of people playing the game and just understand it. So it's almost like this weird mythical thing that was all happening word of mouth, and some of it would come from people reading books, but you could only read a book that you bought. You couldn't just find a PDF online and paw through it. So, like, it was almost this enigmatic puzzle where we're all trying to reach out and touch at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, very precious things. And I think it's the same thing for me as it was for you, Matt, where it's like, it was a big part of my life, and then there's, like, a big gap, and now I'm almost 40, and it's like, okay, it's back on the table now, and I'm so glad it is.
It's the best, yeah. Nothing like a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's kind of it, man. Like I think I like being around people that are like all going through similar things. It's like we're at a period of our lives where it's like it's like okay, we're at the other end of it, So it's like let's do all the cool stuff we wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like D&D was so much fun. Like why don't we just play again?
Yeah.
And best thing ever, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Just like the stars have been aligning. Where we've got this crew now with like, how many people would you say is in our little group? Like 8?
5.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if there's 5.
If you count,
there's 5 on D&D night, but then there's other people that come and play too.
Wargaming and gaming buddies. Yeah, it's like we have like a offline clan, dude.
Yeah.
It's like we're actually like in real life World of Warcraft, and I'm like a troll barbarian, dude.
Right? Yeah.
Like that having that community, like Michelle and I have been talking about this, like how important it is to have community.
Absolutely, it's huge.
It's the only thing you can really affect.
Right.
Like I mean, you can vote or whatever, but it's like but. I mean, it's
That's
important.
Another podcast.
It's important, don't get me wrong, but it's like you can really influence your community. And dude, not only have we done that, but like you, like basically figured out how to make like a gaming guild, like right in our town, dude. And we live in the middle of nowhere, bro. So like I don't know how we pulled that off, but
Light the beacons.
yeah. Seriously, like nerd beacons like lit up, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost to pull a quote from Tag. Like, if are you gonna keep playing, you're gonna get old.
Right.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, man.
That's very poignant, you know?
You know? And I think one of the things that's been really important to me is like, even when I wasn't like playing role-playing games, I made sure that I was still getting together with friends at least bi-monthly.
Yeah.
And we'd like have a game night,
Yeah.
play some board games, card games, whatever.
Yeah.
And like, even though the group that we have now has skipped a couple months here and there, like we all still talk in the group chat and we still like stay in touch and stuff. And then we make sure that, you know, once a month we at least have a date planned if, you know, something gets in the way, whatever, but we're still all communicating, you know.
It's good.
Yeah. I feel like I have more bandwidth.
Yeah.
You know, like just recently, you know, it's...
Well, I feel too like I don't know how much I can speak for you guys on this, but I feel like that time of sacrifice. I heard this brilliant concept of like the decade of sacrifice, where like you kind of put all of your little D&D things on the side, maybe from 22 to 32 or what, or you know, something like that,
Right.
And just focus on getting yourself kind of set up, and like that's what I did, and that's like 100% why I'm able to do this now. You know,
I did the exact same thing.
Right, because you were
and
out
I
at
walked
sea.
a very similar path, I think, and I had to become a man. You know, like, but I had to go grow up a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
like, and then it's like you do that, learn a bunch of stuff, and figure a bunch of stuff out. And
But
then
it
it's
rounds
like,
you out
know,
too.
Yeah, you come
You
back.
know,
Come
you
back
come
to
back
what you
and
like.
like you're a more complex person.
Yeah.
yeah,
And so you have more complex play,
Right.
yeah,
and like you're discovering different parts of roleplay that you didn't discover before, or you're
100%.
finding like different types of like because you've been exposed to all this media, and like now you have more stuff to draw on, you know.
Right.
So you're just like you have these cinematic pictures that you can create in your mind,
Right.
and
Yeah.
just like bring them to life.
yeah.
Share them with everybody, you know.
I feel like in some ways D&D is more enjoyable now because there's less pressure, because the other things in my life are set up well enough so that like D&D isn't like the most important thing in my life. It's a super important thing, but like I'm not as worried now as I was when I was 12 about my character getting iced.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And that lets me take a little more risk, and then actually leads to a little more fun in the game.
Well, and I think, like, you know, there's no, like, vindictive teenagers in the group, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, like, I'm gonna, like, kill your guy and not let you make another one, or, you
Yeah,
know, like,
everybody's
whatever.
had that.
Yeah.
Like I had a campaign that the DM was very specific that we all needed to create good characters, and I showed up and I made a good aligned cleric, and everybody had a bunch of murder hobos.
Yeah, right.
And it was like, why would my player hang out with these guys? I don't know, but we're gonna find out. And like they were just like stabbing people and stealing from everybody in the tavern, and
Yeah.
then like the very first thing we saw like a messenger on his way to the king. And they were like, I want to know what that message is. So they were like trying to, like, first they tried to steal it off him, and then he tried to get away. And they were just doing a ton of damage to him. And I knew they were going to hunt him down one way or another.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I fire my crossbow. And they were like, what? And it was like, I rolled a nat 20, like, clipped him right in the head. He he fell, and we went and read his little note, and I was like, it was a mercy kill.
Oh my god.
But, you know, me and the DM talked about it, and he's like, they're clearly, like, just want to play murder hobos this
Yeah.
campaign. So we re-rolled a new character for me. And so at the beginning of the next session, they were like, there was a long, like, cornfield along the road that they were on.
Yeah.
And, like, an arrow came out from the cornfield and, like, sniped my cleric dead. And my new character steps out of the cornfield, and he's like, bitch owed me money. And so then I had a ranger.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Do you guys want to if we just like go around for questions?
Yeah, sure.
Or do you have a bunch like that you have in your head, or?
Oh, I don't know.
Sorry, should I?
No, it's fine. I can edit everything afterwards.
Okay.
Like we don't have to, especially, who knows what will happen in this first episode. But.
I just don't want anybody to feel like they have to share it or what, whatever. I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah. No, I think it's all good.
Or however you want to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be interesting to talk about what makes a good campaign, or okay. I think actually I should step back from there. I think one of the things I want to talk a little bit about is what are the principles that make for a good group hang. And I think that one of the important things is like fun has to be a high priority, but everybody you want the people you're playing with to have a good enough time that they want to come back again.
Yeah.
I think that's huge.
When you look forward to it, then you keep coming back,
Yeah.
And when you've got a solid, consistent group, I know I do,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Like 6 o'clock, let's go, man.
And a lot of that is people just being honest about what kind of play they're interested in.
Yeah, that's huge.
Everybody just straight up saying, like, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And then you can kind of form everything from that.
Yeah.
Just have a solid foundation.
Yeah, definitely.
I also think that, like, if you have the right friends, like, let's say that Louis really wanted to, like, play the Buffy game or something, Like, we could play some Buffy,
Yeah.
Like, I'd play that with you if you really wanted to, like, play that. I think, like, we can accommodate the different things people want to try and do.
Right. Yeah, it seems like the people in the group need to have a balance of, like, being interested in the things that they're interested in, but also being open to things that they haven't heard of or whatever,
Right.
And I think that's something that just about everybody in the group has, like Jacob, who just DM'd the Strahd campaign, had never played D&D, or maybe he only played once many, many years ago before the campaign we did just before the Strahd campaign. So he was like basically a brand new player, and then like 4 or 6 weeks later, he's like DMing one of the hardest campaigns to DM
Yeah,
in the history of D&D.
Right.
And he did a great job and
Yeah.
had a fun time. And like he couldn't make it tonight, but he said, "Tell the podcast world I love D&D."
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's another person who's a writer too. So like, it's been really cool to have his perspective on this stuff, like learning about pacing and character arcs and development and stuff.
really cool.
Like
Yeah.
the arc that Matt's character Clive, the half-orc thief, went through was pretty interesting. So that whole thing started with like, didn't Jacob ask you? I think you asked him a question. He's like, "Are you real? How do you know you're real?"
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was, I don't know, it was like some kind of illusion or something. I don't remember what happened, but it was probably a dumbass question, I admit, but like, it's just like, oh man, I didn't know I was going to end up questioning my own existence, like, as a consequence. But it was interesting, and I think once I kind of figured out where he was going with it, I was like into it. And I think like when a DM kind of tries to hook you, sometimes you just go along for the ride, and it's like, I like what you had in store for me, that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And he was really good at that stuff,
Right.
So yeah, he did a really good job. That's a very difficult campaign, and it's very, like, I remember when I was like kind of beginning it and like never got really anywhere with it, it was very hard to figure out like what I was actually supposed to read and
Right.
what I was supposed to keep to myself. And like I would like read it over and over, and I was like, but anyway, that's kind of like my own issue. But I actually clicked a highlighter and like ripped through it. So I hope he's doing okay with the book, but the ramblings of a madman in there.
Yeah. Well, he did fine with it. It was funny because he's my neighbor, and I'd call him and be like, "Hey man, my car won't start. Can you help me?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm just reading Strahd. I'll be over in a few minutes though."
Yeah.
Like he's chowing through that book.
It's an endeavor. You know, I thought it was very daunting, you know, when I was about to really do it, and you know, we didn't get anywhere close to where our group did, you know. Yep.
Yeah, that's like a huge thing. Be like, wow, we finished one of the big D&D campaigns.
Yeah, we just smoked it. You know?
Yeah.
Well,
awesome.
that's part of the reason why I wanted to run Stormwreck, because I knew it was going to be like an easy way into campaigns that are like pre-made.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was like, I've never run a module before. And, you know, I had 2 years of a homebrew, you know, of like toiling all week long and like creating something new and fun every week, but like never anything that was pre-made for me. So I knew there was going to be a learning curve there, but it's really interesting to see like how it's all set up, and you know, once you get the hang of it, you kind of know what to look for and what to kind of, you know, dig deep into, and the other stuff you can kind of just modify, you know.
Right.
Like those zombies, you know, I found like some ways to kind of modify them so that they weren't just like run-of-the-mill undead.
Yeah.
So that they all had their kind of own little flavor.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a lot of little stuff like that you can do in a contained module like that that's on an island where you don't have a lot of NPCs and the world is kind of small. You can kind of add stuff of your own, kind of make other things your own. You don't really have to worry about, you know, in a campaign like Strahd, you've got a giant world to deal with, and there's like towns of people, and it's like there's so much there. Like that would be very daunting as your first one to run.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the most interesting things with this Stormwreck Isle campaign was the time element, because that kind of like keeps everything in check. Like we could have just hung out in Barovia in the Strahd campaign for like, we could have just done a whole year of just going around and overturning every rock in that country. Yeah. But
I think if we had elected to do that, if I remember correctly, there is a magical, I think actually a legendary weapon that is a Mace of Disruption, and it's like a leg bone of some saint. It's like the most Warhammer
I love that
D&D weapon that I think I've ever heard of.
yeah.
And it just absolutely like dominates undead.
Wow.
Like if you hit like even powerful undead with like a Mace of Disruption, it literally like explodes them. And then they damage the other undead. Like dude, it's insane. Yeah.
Wow.
And you get that, and I think it's really, it's like not as powerful as the Sun Sword, but it's like pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a there definitely would have been some things to discover, but I'm glad we got it done. I can't imagine what the treasure is going to yield.
And you know what?
Yeah.
It's kind of cool because, like, if we wanted to revisit it sometime later on, there's still puddles to play in. You know what I mean? So, like, if we ever had some other characters, and we're like, hey, it'd be fun to revisit, you know, that campaign. We definitely didn't do everything.
Right.
You know, we could take a completely different path to the castle. You know you're going to roll different tarot cards. It's going to be a completely different game.
Yeah. If we go back to Ravenloft, if I DM'd a Ravenloft campaign, I would do an alternate setting in Ravenloft. I would do where the like desert is, and it's like the Valley of the Kings, but it's all undead like mummies and stuff.
Whoa.
That's,
awesome.
Dude, it's unbelievable. It's so cool, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I love a big sandbox like that. You know, you can just
That's a desert. Yeah.
literally, yeah.
Yeah.
You just kick around a different part of it, you know?
Yeah.
I think I love that stuff.
Yeah. What makes you guys want to keep playing D&D now? Like we're all getting old. Like we talk about how it's fun and stuff, but like there's got to be are there experiences that you guys are after in the game at this point, or is it just like you're happy to just have the chill time with the buddies, or is it
It's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the role playing specifically is a type of play that you you get more out of than like your standard board game. You know what I mean? You can explore. Like I said, it's a lot more complex. You can explore different facets of humanity and just like you're just storytelling with your friends, but you're doing it in a setting that's, you know, mystical and magical, and you know there's stuff you don't know about and stuff you want to know about, and you know there's the question of what and why, and you know you just end up down a rabbit hole, and that other games don't do that.
Right. It's interesting how after playing D&D sometimes other games just feel like pretty shallow in comparison.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I'm saying D&D. We don't have to say D&D. We could just say role-playing games, especially tabletop role-playing games.
Specifically, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Matt?
So I think that, like, for me, it's probably a lot of the above. You know, like it's like I get, you know, time with my friends. I get like the kind of fantasy stuff that I think kind of fuels like, you know, my imagination, and it's like brain food or brain soul food, you know? And I mean, dudes have been getting together to like bro out and do a thing for a really long time.
Yeah.
And you know, you can do that in like any number of ways, and this is the way that I like to do it. I like to play super complicated board games with my friends that all like the same stuff that I do, and like nobody asks about it, and I don't have to talk to anybody but my friends about it, because it's so complicated and weird that like, you know, everybody's like, wait, what? Like, what? You know, like I you know, I just, there's people that like get it and don't get it.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's like, yeah, like, and people that are like into games, but they like board games, they like, you know, like the bonding and stuff, but it's a different kind of experience than D&D. Like we played D&D for like 6 hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, unless you're playing like cutthroat Monopoly, dude,
Or
like,
Risk.
you know? Yeah, right.
I've played Risk for months.
But like Risk is just like 100% tactical.
Yeah.
You know, like D&D, dude, like you could like tell a story that's like so mind-bending and bizarre, and like just goes to like all these different things, and you could get like, you know, quasi-philosophical with like a fantasy game.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
Like some of the greatest, you know, stories that have ever been told are like these crazy fantasy stories that like really, you know, they go deep. And sometimes I really like that. So I think, yeah, it's just like a totally wide variety of experiences that just tick a lot of boxes for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that the 6 hours point is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because, like, I can't think... like, there's very, very few things that I'm pretty happy to do for 6 hours
Right.
in a row.
Right.
And, like, D&D is definitely one of them. There's, like, a couple of video games that are like that, but
Right.
I feel like I get burnt out from video games sooner than I would get burnt out from D&D, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It depends.
Well, there's some great games, but, like, if it's a video game, you're always going to be bound to, like, what is in...
The program.
Like what art they have made in the game and whatever. I mean, I think that there's games that kind of work their way around that a little bit if they're like procedurally interesting and and where you can be creative, like Minecraft or Factorio or whatever, but or Avorion.
Yep.
You know.
Yep.
But like, I feel like at the end of a 6-hour D&D session, we're not closing up because people are getting bored. We're closing up because it's like
late.
It's like, gotta go to bed.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's really important too, is like our group specifically is we're all very creative, you know,
Yeah.
and we happen to be really fortunate and have a lot of people that could just step up to the plate and run a night or two, you know, and I think that's, since we can all see each other eye to eye on that level, like, you know the work that's going into it and you can appreciate it and in turn reciprocate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge.
It really is.
Like, understanding how much work, like, when we got this thing going, geez, it was like, what, September or October? When did you go to Switzerland?
Yeah, it was in, it was October.
It was October.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got this thing going in October, I remember asking Louis to start run, hey man, you want to run a game? Like the last time Louis and I had played a game, it was Starfinder, and I was the GM. Starfinder's also totally awesome, and I hope we play that sometime soon too.
Yeah.
But I know Louis had a pretty legendary campaign he was doing, and I knew it was a big ask, but he, stepped up to the plate anyway, and we did it. And then having it as a pre-baked campaign kind of you feel like that made it a little less of a constraint on your personal time outside of the game?
100%.
Yeah.
No. It's like, and like I said, I had freedom to kind of modify the things that I thought were going to make things fun, but not kind of obsess about, the intricacies of things.
Yeah.
So it was more like, oh, let's tweak this, let's change that. I think this was more interesting over here. I think this would be more fun if we did it this way. And so it was more a sandbox that I could kind of take toys out of and put more toys over here and kind of like
instead of a wood shop where you got to carve every single toy out of a
real
log. Yeah.
I think that made a huge difference, especially like I said, where I wanted to try running a module, and I knew that I wanted to start light, something that I could mess around with if I wanted to, but also wasn't going to eat up all my time.
Yeah.
And because when I ran that campaign, it was like all day at work, I'd be thinking about okay, what's in this next town, and who's there,
Dude,
and
it's real. Yeah.
And then my players would show up, and I'd have this really insanely ADHD NPC that's just can't sit still, and he's tinkering in his workshop, and he's half ignoring everything they're saying, and he says ha a lot, and he's just they just see this little gnome just running around his workshop working a little on this, and then I'm working on this, now I'm working on that, and it's just it wasn't one project, he was working on a million projects at once.
Yeah.
And only half of what they were saying was going in and coming out, and at the end of the session they were like, did you make him up from scratch? Because the voice, the everything, that was insane. It was yeah, well, I kind of had an idea of what he was like in my head, and I thought about him all week long enough till
was he a little autobiographical?
No, but it was kind of
like that.
I kind of pictured if you took something with really high intelligence and then spun him into this kind of witty Robin Williams type energy where he's just
Flubber or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just like I did, the character just did a line before they got there, and he was just all over the place, and they were like, wow, you didn't shut up for 10 minutes, but that was amazing.
Yeah.
We learned so much about the campaign in that 10 minutes, and we got everything we needed to go to the next quest, and it was just but I did that every single week. I was every town had something interesting about it. There was a town that was made, every building was made of shipwrecks, so all the buildings were parts of boats, and there was another one that was all the buildings were up on real high stilts because they were really dangerous monsters that came out at night, and so they had to find interesting ways to get to places because how do we even get to that building? Oh, there's a bridge over there, and they had to navigate this stilt town.
Yeah. That's cool.
And it was just I had something, and then when my party split, I had 2 campaigns running in the same setting.
Masochist.
And they were just trying to beat each other to the end. And then when they met up at the end, they all had to work together, and it all came together. But it was a lot of work, a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
But when I thought about all the modules that are out there, especially when we were running Starfinder, and I was reading all the different stuff we could do there, and I was looking at some of those modules, and I was I bet some of this would be really fun. So when we brought it back to D&D, I was I'm way more familiar with 5e rules.
Yeah.
If we ran a 5e module, I would totally be able to handle that.
Right.
And I think that, like I said, it was a really nice stepping stone into modules.
Yeah.
It's such a small setting, something that you can really like sink your teeth into.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me to think back to the old Advanced Dungeons and Dragons days, where you get the player's handbook with the Jeff Easley art on the cover or whatever, and then like you go into the book and like at the back they would have this big magical spread. I mean, it would show there were like 10 different at least whole campaign worlds you could go into.
Yeah.
And I remember just looking through like, okay, we got like Ravenloft, obviously crazy horror thing with vampires and darkness and all this stuff.
Gothic
and then
horror,
right, Al-Qadim was
Al-Qadim, that's the Arabian Nights.
Right, yeah, that's a whole other completely different aesthetic from anything you even see in the player's handbook.
But some of the coolest like story hooks for adventures that I could go on for an hour about it,
Really? Yeah, I never got a chance to dig into it.
It's all like Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, like all the Arabian Persian mythology.
Blue Robin Williams genies and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jafar and he's a bitch by that time,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's interesting though because I remember at that point in my life being 12 and like having all this time on my hands and looking at those, I look at those and be like, wow, that's super cool. And then I think like those boxes are like $20 or $30 at the time, which adjusted for inflation is apparently it's approximately $5.7 million for a 12-year-old in 1995.
Yeah.
And like I was just thinking like, dude, I can get graph paper for like $1.
Right. Yeah, if you'd invested that in Apple,
Right.
Yeah, but I bought the Birthright box. What the hell?
Yeah. Right.
No regrets. Right.
But like it was interesting though because at that time in my life, it's like I had plenty of imagination and all the time in the world to just like sit at my mom's house and draw freaking maps. And I don't know what happened to those old maps. I'm sure if I really looked around, I could find one or two of them. But I would just draw big maps, like little rooms, big rooms, like this thing. And then I would like code it out. Like I'd put the page of like I just say like 83 in this room. It's like it's page 83 of the illustrator's manual.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
And then like
I do a similar thing. Yeah.
It's super cool. So and now Matt, you're running our new campaign. That we kind of had our session 0, but the big first official breakthrough with everybody is going to be in 6 days.
It's going to be coming right up.
And you've been working on that for...
I've been working on that for a very long time. And, I've been working on it for a long time, but I've been thinking about it even longer. And I think that's, like, the more important thing. Because I have a lot of it in kind of, like, branching decision paths, like, in my head. And I think, I tend to kind of stick to, like, a philosophy with, like, a session where we're playing D&D where, try and make sure that there is enough role play, try to make sure that everybody has something to do at least, like, once or twice, where it's, like, the spotlight's on them,
Yeah.
And then try and have one combat, like, one thing that we're going to kind of crawl through. And I think that if you can kind of pull it all off in one session, that's your archetypical, D&D game. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
I think I'm excited to run it. I'm really excited about the setting. I think that like the story will progress with these kind of escalating, tiers of threat, you know what I mean? And it will get more and more, like the stakes will get, higher and higher and higher until, we're battling in space or like on top of a cloud or something crazy, like, the sun is shining and, it's like, So, that's kind of how I envision it. And, depending on how long we run it, like, I think there'll be some cool things available to the characters, to kind of have, like, for toys. And those things will also help move the plot forward. And, Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. So, and then I think like that, that setting, is kind of like in my head, and it's really just going to be kind of specific to like this archipelago area, and that's going to be basically like this, coastal portion of a southern continent on this planet, and then this island system that I guess the best way I could describe it is like, it's like the Caribbean, but it's a little bit different because like the geography of it is kind of more in like a ring, and there may be a reason for that kind of unfolds like throughout the campaign.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So what? It's a lot of energy and time to come up with a giant world like that. Mm-hmm. Even if you have a lot of life experiences, say on a sailing ship to draw from.
Yeah.
What motivates you to expend all that time and energy and effort in spite of all of the regular grown-up stuff you have going as a dad and all that stuff?
So I don't want to like brag or anything like that, but like I guess I think that you might be surprised to find out how little preparation it takes.
Yeah.
Because I think like, at least like I said, with my philosophy, if you have those general ideas set out and like, it's like we're trying to check those boxes, then I think that you can have a variety of different things to kind of pick from. And, like if kind of how the plot's supposed to go, like I would just say like with this group at least, it's not predictable, but it's not chaotic enough that, you have to just like go absolutely crazy with preparation.
Right.
And I think also, a good DM should be able to put up at least some guardrails, and I'm not talking about like horse blinders.
Yeah.
Right.
But like there's some boundaries, and you can do that in a couple ways. Like you can do that like, through maps. Like you can do it like through storytelling. Maybe there's a character that they've bonded to, which, it sounds like maybe there's some relationships building with some of the NPCs in like the first, session 0 thing. So maybe there's some motivation there.
Time constraints.
Right. I think like
if everybody's in a wooden ship too, it's like, it's like, oh, I'm just gonna walk to the next town. It's like,
right.
No, you're not. You're on a ship, and there's ocean all around. So
well, like here's a great example, right? Like in like one we just did, right? And that's a good point. Like you're stuck here. Like you have to talk to these people. And like, it's similar in like Ravenloft in that you're dumped into this like horrific place and you have nowhere to go, nowhere to help you, except for like a small handful of people, right? And that's like Irina, like the character. And, they do a pretty good job like describing like her motivations and like her character so that the DM can role play it and it gives the stats and all that. But it's still something that somebody else has constructed and written, and it's up to you to digest it and use, as much or as little as they've given you. But it's up to you to like adapt the character from what they've written it. When you're doing like a homebrew, you've taken it basically like soup to nuts, so you know exactly like how those characters are going to work. And I think like, it's like you go into like a market and, you generally know like what the shops are, you can describe it, you can write it down, you can kind of just make up like the shopkeepers' names.
Right.
Just like, you got a handful of personalities. Like I got like an island, like a guy with a West Indian accent.
Yeah.
I got like a girl like that. And then like maybe a couple like a gruff half-orc, a kind of smarmy elf, and then like a mischievous halfling.
Right.
Those are the 5 personalities that are going to be at the market. It's going to be random, which shopkeeper has which, and I'm just going to kind of go with it, you know? And they're probably not going to go to every shop. They're going to want to go to where they want to go. So which one of those personalities do I like the most?
Right. It's not like you're up till 1 a.m. like, what if they want to buy golf balls in the 3rd capital city of the 3rd island? Like
that's exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, nobody can prepare like that.
Yeah.
And if you don't at least try to make a good effort at winging it, and you feel confident enough to do that, you have to do that, or it's gonna suck, and you're gonna be writing all these crazy notes, and it's gonna be no better than like the Strahd book where you're flipping back and forth, and
Right.
you know, I think that like if you can really pull it off, like just being as imaginative and like just flexible as possible, and you can go anywhere.
I think
you
it's
know?
really helpful too when your characters are pretty predictable,
Yeah.
because then you know what they're looking for and you can kind of adapt things.
Yeah.
Like I
Right.
was playing a 3.5 campaign where my monk, this was the worst monk ever, like I couldn't land any hits, and like I was getting beat up like
Right.
every single fight, and I couldn't hit anybody, and it was just like, wow, I can only land shots if I'm grappling.
Yeah.
So like I just had this character with he tried to get you to grapple right off and just ground and pound, because I was the only
Let's
way
wrestle.
I could do damage.
Right.
But I his like character arc, he used to work in like an antique store.
Right.
And so like in every town we went to, I was like, hey, is there an antique store? You know? And you could tell the DM didn't like want to do that. You know?
Right.
It was
Here
just like
comes
I go to
Louis.
an antique store and she'd be like, yeah, he thinks you're really annoying.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just looking around. Is there anything interesting? Like, you know, like maybe cool magic item or something? Like, what's the most expensive piece you have here? Or, you know, like, tell me something cool about your shop. And then, like, the other thing he would do is he would go to the graveyard, because, like, that's how you, like, you can look at all the names on the gravestones and kind of learn a little bit about the history of the town without even having to talk to the people.
Right.
You know, and then when you do meet people in town, you can put two and two together and be like, oh, this is that family, you know,
Right.
and be like, they've been here for a long time.
Yeah.
And you actually know something about them, you know. And like the rest of the time, he was like in a tree meditating. But like it was like when you have a character that's very, you know, ritualistic, very routine. You know what I'm going to do in the next town. I'm going to find an antique store and go to the graveyard, and then maybe I'll go find my party members. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he's kind of a loner, but, you know, he's there when they start getting into the meat and potatoes of the campaign. Everyone's done shopping and resting and whatever. Like, I'm there to, like, throw down at the tavern when you guys meet up with me later, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's, it aids the story a lot, because you don't have to, that DM doesn't have to prep so much for me. They know what I'm looking for.
Right,
They know what I'm going to do.
Right.
I wonder what Seth's DM is like up there in heaven right now. Like, let's see, he's going to a new store, a new town. All right, guitar shops and gaming shops. I'm just going to roll up all that stuff real quick.
Right. Yeah, I think like once you actually kind of get into the dungeon, it becomes a lot easier for the DM, because like that has to be a specific thing. It's the overworld that gets complicated, and I think that the important things are like, if you're coming up with stuff on the fly, remember to write down the people that you make up, because that's something that I've had happen to me where I'm going a little too on the fly and I just start making crap up, and then somebody's like, oh, we want to go see that guy. And I'm like,
What guy?
yeah, I'm like, I don't know. So like that's something.
They're like, that wasn't what he talked like.
right. I'm like, but you know, but I think like it's kind of like you're there. Like there's objectives that you are always trying to achieve, and as long as like that's clear, or those objectives, if there's multiple, are clear, then it's pretty easy to just, you know, have some stuff in the pipe and be ready to go.
Yeah.
And you run into stuff where people can't make sessions, so you need to be able to like roll with that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know, maybe you were planning something for tonight, but last minute somebody ducked out, and now you're running a completely different campaign for the night. And that's where you can draw on, like, you know, media to kind of just make things fun for a night. Like, maybe you're not even in your campaign tonight. Maybe you're running, you know, Jumbo's Dream.
Right.
Like, you know, and you're just running a whole campaign for the night. That's just whatever you dreamed about that night.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and then, like, you know, something crazy happens because it's a dream and reality's, like, all warped. And, like, we end up talking about that for, like, years. Because, like, that could never have happened in our campaign setting. Like, that was a very specific instance of something, like, crazy that would never have happened in that campaign.
Yeah.
You know, like, I remember we had something like that. I think it was, like, I mashed together, like, Wizard of Oz with, like, Candyland. And then, like, set it in, like, a Pan's Labyrinth type of, like, setting. And it was just, like,
Tell me
you know.
more.
And then you have, like, you know, Miyamoto Ken with the Laffy Taki Wakizashi. You know what I mean? Like, it just, like, it's little things like that just, like, to completely, like, pull your players out of the world for a minute and just, like, spin their heads around. And then, like, you set them back in and they're like, what was that other thing all about? That was fun, but, like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Totally, man.
And then, like, you know, like we had a character, our fighter, they were actually supposed to be in a big battle that night.
Yeah.
So I prepped a lot. I gave them a bunch of materials, and they were allowed to, this was the first big battle that they had. They had a huge one at the end. But I gave them a list of materials and a battlefield, and I said, prepare this town for war, because it's coming. And they, you know, they barricaded stuff and they made, like, little mazes with, like, slits in the wall so people could, like, stab through. And, like, they had a big bonfire in the back to keep everything lit because the whole campaign was underground.
Right.
And, you know, they were really shocked when a troll broke through the wall and the first thing that all the little hobgoblins did was go for the bonfire.
Yeah.
Because they were like, we have dark vision. We know you guys need that bonfire. Like, they were trying to put out the fire.
Yeah.
Once that fire was out, they were like, oh, crap. Like, now this is a hard fight.
Right, yeah, that changes it all.
And so, like...
I remember doing the same kind of thing where you kind of, like, pull from different sources when we were doing Starfinder.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was a... at the time that was happening, I was also working on... I was building my wooden workbench in my wood shop.
Yeah.
Which is this huge project. And in the time I was working on that, I was just pawing through YouTube for old audiobooks. And I found one. It was this book from, like, the early 1900s. And it was called A Columbus of Space.
Mm.
And, like, the idea... It was, like, just when people were figuring out about atomic energy and that kind of stuff. So, like, in the story in the book... Like, it's like these kind of good old guys from England all hanging out, and one of them is really smart in their little group. And he's like, oh, yeah, of course, atomic energy, that makes sense. And I'm making something at my house. And he, like, basically turns his woodshed into a spaceship. And they, like, fly to Venus. And there's, like, two completely different cultures on either side of the planet of Venus. And, like... all this crazy shit, and I just was like, I'm like sitting there carving a little inlay on the side of the workbench, like, oh, that's interesting. And then next thing you know, I'm like, ah, crap, it's Starfinder Day. So Columbus is space, you know, and that book was like so weird and obscure. I only heard of it because of like a random YouTube thing, you know. But then like to have that and pull from it, like the guys in the group had never heard of that story, and then it gave us a really interesting thing to spin from, you know.
Yeah, I tend to pull a lot of, you know, things from different, you know, video games, you know, books, movies, a lot of movies, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, because, like, why not? Like, some of the greatest moments ever are from those things, and, like, you know, if you can play those out and pull it off, you know, and your buddies are there, like, yeah, it's awesome, man, you know?
Yeah. I think one of the nicest things about the D&D campaigns and all the gaming stuff we're doing is like it's really nice to do something that's like just for pleasure and you don't have to worry about it conflicting with copyright or trying to like make money off of it or anything like that. Like you know, like for me, even if I'm playing music for fun, like there's always part, because I'm a musician, if anybody didn't know that. Who's
you play music, dude?
What? Yeah. Sitting here in this room surrounded by a giant 8-foot guitar on the wall and stuff.
Right. There may have been music played.
Yeah, right, yeah. But, like, even if I'm playing music for fun alone at home, it's like one part of me in my brain's like, okay, I gotta make sure that I'm not scrolling off too bad because I want to make sure I'm doing this just right, so I'm gonna continue to be viable as a player. But if I'm like painting a model or like coming up with a D&D character, it's like I could just call him Gandalf and just completely rip something else off,
Right.
and nobody cares. We're just having fun, and like
not a single person cares.
Right.
You know, it's
Totally.
it's like that is cool. We're gonna make Gandalf. You know, we're gonna make him have quite a ride.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. You ain't Middle Earth anymore, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
But yeah, it's really important to be able to pivot because, like, you
Yeah.
know, even though we were supposed to run that really big fight that night, one of the guys wasn't there, so instead the whole night became about, you know, you turn around and he got stabbed by a spider, he's paralyzed, and now you gotta go find this herb to like fix him.
Right.
And then that's that night's campaign. They gotta fix their buddy, and then when he shows up the next week, he's all better.
Yeah, it's like the random like TV series episode where you're like, what the hell did that have to do with
Yeah.
anything? Like,
Right.
Like a flashback episode.
yeah,
or
like
a
what? Why do I care about like
Flashback
stuff?
episodes are actually really, really good. Like you,
for D&D.
for any role playing game.
Yeah.
Like
That's how you'd be a perfect way to flesh out like backstories and stuff.
Right, right.
Now. And,
It was fun doing a bit of that when your character in our campaign had that moment of freaking out about like, am I real?
Yeah.
And like, you know, we're sitting there trying to figure out like how to convince him he's real, and like I had fun thinking like, okay, well my character has got like a wood carving kit, so like I was carving out images of like the different adventures we did and some of his character, you know, Matt's character's coolest moments, and then like it was cool because after that, when we're facing even deeper troubles later on, your character's like, oh no, these guys are my friends.
Yeah.
I'm not biting the, you know, forbidden fruit.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was cool. And I'm glad that like the everybody's kind of like choice was like important, and it was like it mattered, you know what I mean? And like everybody got to kind of like role play it how their character would do it. And that's cool that we're doing that. It's not just like, yeah, no, I said no to the, or, you know, move on, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was super cool how understanding Jacob was when we were almost all of us, just rejected all of the tasty but very dangerous things that he offered us, you know. And he's like, no, I was expecting you guys to probably say no to all of them, but I had fun making them. And it's like, I think that's part of what a good DM is about, is like making stuff, being passionate about it, but then like not getting so attached to it that you're going to get like pissed if the players don't do the steps that you're imagining that they would do, you know?
I think so. Yeah. And like, there are always ways to get them there and make it look, you know, like reskin something real quick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can kind of, you're like, they're not really doing it right. I'm gonna like shelf that, and then you know, like pull it out, like, you know, I don't know, 2 sessions later.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think another thing that I did that I think I was trying to help my characters like feel more pulled into the campaign was the boat that they had commissioned had a crew of 11 guys. And they met them all at the beginning, and they stuck with them all the way to the end. And like, you know, they came to know these characters really well and all of their specialties. And so we would have sessions, you know, little breaks in between where like we'd go back and tell the story of like how that person like got to be where they are today.
So
and
cool.
like, even though, you know, they're used to playing like their characters, you know, we ran this for 2 years, I can pull them out of those characters just for one night and say, hey, you're a guard, you were there that night, and this is what went down. You know? And so the characters, like, they've heard the story, right? They know what's supposed to happen, they know what's gonna happen, but now they get to take part in like how it happened, right? And so that like they know how it's supposed to end, but they get to be part of that story, you know. And so like one of them, the first mate, His name was Trog Oglaga. And he was a paladin, big behemoth colossus, like, and he had like a arch enemy that was like a necromancer, and like he had this like massive battle on a beach, and like the guy's just like coming out of the ocean with like a giant like horde of like undead, and you know, he turned most of them away, and then they all fought what was left.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it ended with him winning. You know, but that's how you find out how he got his scar.
That's cool, right?
And you know, and then like later on in the campaign, like they can draw off that experience, and they're like, no, like I was there with you. You know, like I know this person now. Like it's an NPC, but I know their story. I know why they're here. They don't have to imagine why this character is doing the things they're doing anymore, because they know them. They've known them for 2 years.
Yeah.
They've been on this journey with them, and they keep coming back to these characters, and they're, you know, they get into ship combats with them, you know, and even though the NPCs aren't there with them for most of the campaign, they're there enough so that like they have something solid to come back to. Even after some crazy adventure, the Emerald's still going to be there at the end of the day.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And the crew's still going to be there at the end of the day. And, you know,
And speaking of something solid to come back to, this first episode's already over an hour long.
Holy cow.
So maybe we should pick it up where we're leaving off, and thanks for tuning in, all one viewer. It's probably just us listening to this later while we're painting.
I'm gonna listen to it in my car on the way to work.
Yeah.
Over and over.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Thanks, Matt and Lou, for coming out. And,
Yeah, man.
thank you guys.
Yeah.